Hi, I'm Vinnie Tortorich. Folks, your good intentions have been stolen, but don't worry, I'm here to help you get them back. You may be soft and succulent when we start this process, but hang in there. It won't be long before you're lean and mean. It's the Friday show. So you know what that means. We bring in a guy with it's not really hard to do, but we bring someone in with way more knowledge than I will ever have. And they will spread that knowledge to you. This guy has been on the show a few times. And if you've seen my movies, Fat, a documentary, and Fat, a documentary 2, he's in that. So you can go check all of that out. He's also a cardiologist. So if your doctor has been telling you, hey, you need to be on a statin, maybe you do, maybe you don't. We'll find out today with Dr. Bret Scher. How you doing, Bret?
I'm doing great, Vinny. Thanks for having me on again. It's always a pleasure to be here with you.
Bret, I'm always excited that, I was just talking to Nina earlier. She was on the show the week before this on Friday, and I'm just tickled pink that you guys just continue to come back and help push all of this forward. It's not easy, but you guys are out there fighting the good fight. I don't know how many people actually do this, Bret, but I do these consults every day. And let's say I do an average 3 a day, 5 days a week. So, that would be 15 consults. I'll probably do closer to 20 to 25 consults a week. I think it's close to 25. So it's more than 3 a day. And one of the questions I get probably at least once a day is, the reason I called you is because my doctor wants me on a statin.
Mm-hmm.
And at least once a day, I have to say, I can listen to what you have to say. You could give me all of your numbers. I shall not comment on that portion of this conversation.
Right.
But there's a guy named Bret Scher. He's got MD in front of his name. More so, he's a cardiologist, and he can read these numbers. Do you ever get anyone calling you that I've recommended to you?
Actually, yes, I do. I absolutely do. Once you have the MD after your name, it's a little limiting in that I need to have a license in the state where somebody is to do a consult with them. So unfortunately, a couple of the people you've sent, I've not been able to see, but a handful I have been able to, and I'm thankful for the consults, because those are the people I really love being able to help, because they feel like they're lost, like they're stuck between two worlds, and they feel like they're sort of a ping pong, and they don't know what the right answer is. So that's the role I love to have. And similar to you, I mean, we do have a lot of similarities in that we've got our online presence, our podcast and websites where we can reach millions of people. And then we've got the face-to-face one-on-one interaction where we can help that individual in front of us. So I really enjoy having both those opportunities, just like you do, to really help as many people as we can.
Do you feel, I always say it this way because it's the truth. My accountant, he's not my business manager. I'm my business manager, but my accountant always says to me, I'm looking at what you end up getting in your pocket from these consults, and I know they take you a lot of time. Are you sure that's the best way to spend your time? You're not working smart. And I always say to him, and we've had this conversation at least 10 times, he won't give it up.
Yeah.
I'll say to him, I don't think you understand. It's the only way I can keep my ear to the ground is to coach. And if I'm not coaching, I'm not learning. I don't know what's going on out there. Things are happening fast, but the human body is still what it was 10,000 years ago. So I need to disseminate all of this information that's coming at people, information that's coming at me. If you could get one-on-one with someone, you could get to the root cause and at least get them moving in the right direction. Right. And by that point, my accountant is glazed over and said, you owe the government a lot of money, and you need to come up with, So that's basically what goes on there. But do you feel the same way?
I echo that completely. And, we can help the individual in front of us, but we have to admit that individual is helping us as well. We're learning from that individual, because we can tell them what they should eat and how they should exercise and what they should do, but incorporating that into their lifestyle is a whole nother subject. And that's going to be different for every person. So understanding what the barriers are, what the limitations are, what some of the successes are, that really helps us. And then we can take that knowledge and help other people. So I think there's no question that that individual relationship helps us as much as it helps the other person. But people are looking for this because people have doctors or coaches and trainers where they might not be getting the best advice for them. And I think that's the key, is that we don't live in a one size fits all society, whether it's keto for everybody or whether it's low fat for everybody or whether it's calorie reduction for everybody. There's not a one size fits all, but there's a message that's going to help the majority of people. And there's a specific message that's going to help each individual. And it's a skill to be able to come up with that. It's a skill that you have and you've refined over your decades of coaching. And I like to think I'm the same way, that individual relationship is something that we'll never give up, and we'll always have that skill to be able to help that individual person.
Yeah, it's funny. I wrote that in Fitness Confidential. And I guess the book has been out for 9 years now, which means I wrote it like 10 or 11 years ago. And one of the lines I wrote in that book was, back in the 60s and 70s, a trainer was a one-trick pony, because no one was really obese. No one really had a weight problem whatsoever. And if someone went to the trainer, they wanted to add muscle. Mm-hmm. So you only had to be a gym rat to tell people, hey, eight reps, 4 sets, move on, and give it to them in such a way where they could build muscle. And kind of at the beginning of my career in the early 80s, it was still that way because we just didn't have it. I know that sounds weird, but we didn't have morbid obesity back then.
Yeah.
And I remember my early days, men and even the women, they were like, hey, I want to look like, Chrissy Everest or Martina Navratilova. They want to look like sporty women. Now we have bodybuilding women and all this kind of stuff. But that there, other than, Rachel McLeish and a few bodybuilding women, there weren't a lot of those in the early 80s. So they had other models, they wanted to look like tennis players, Steffi Graf or whoever was around at that time. So it was easy for a guy like me when I started my career, just get these women, get them in the gym, put a little muscle on them, keep their fat down, and the muscles will show through and they'll be happy. I'll be happy and everyone wins. But at some point, and I related it to astronauts, I said, when we first started putting astronauts in space, we only had to find someone dumb enough to let us duct tape them to a pile of dynamite and shoot them outside of the atmosphere. So I'm not sure, we had guys with balls bigger than brains back then. But at some point, we started saying to these astronauts, listen, we're not going to just shoot you into outer space. Once you get out there, we're not just going to let gravity whip you around the Earth a few times and then shoot you back into the atmosphere. We want you to drive this spaceship to the moon. And when you get there, we want you to land it, we want you to get out, walk around the moon, maybe put a flag in. And by the way, that's not good enough. Now we want you to go connect with a Russian satellite that's going around the Earth at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Now you got to learn how to drive and get that thing. So astronauts had to learn more and more and more. They couldn't just be, some cowboy who was willing to be duct taped to a pile of dynamite. And I feel like trainers had to do that at some point. We had to, teach people how to, some people wanted to do CrossFit. Some people wanted to do triathlons. Other people would say, hey, do you know anything about Pilates? Do you know anything about yoga? And you had to learn all of this different stuff or you became obsolete. At least in LA where I was, it was highly competitive. Yeah. So you were constantly learning new tricks. And I'm starting to feel like it's that way for a guy like you. At one time, Bret, you said, okay, I'm an MD. Now I'm going to specialize in cardiology. So you take that. But do you feel like you have to know so much more now than you did even 10 years ago?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great analogy too. You're the master of analogies. I love that. But yeah, I mean, look, there's always new studies. The field is always progressing. There's always new things coming on. And you can sort of approach it in 2 different ways. You can say, look, I'm going to stick to what the guidelines say and just practice what the guidelines say because that's what all the experts agree is the right way to practice and not feel like you have to keep up with everything new. that is a way to practice. And there are a number of doctors who are so busy that they don't really have a choice but to sort of practice that way. And then the other way to practice is to say, look, I want to be on the cutting edge, whatever that may be, the cutting edge of something. I want to know everything about this, all the new studies, all the new research, so that I can help my patients and I can help my population improve well beyond what the guidelines will get them to. So there is that sort of approach, and that's the approach, I like to take. And I'm fortunate now that I'm in a work environment where I have the time and energy to be able to expend to that. But when you're seeing patients every 10 to 15 minutes and you've got 40 patients you have to see that day and notes you have to do and people you have to round on in the hospital. I mean, I can see how so many doctors fall into the pattern of just go by the guidelines because you don't have the time or the energy. And that's a sign of a broken system. I mean, that's just the system we have in the US and for a large part in Europe as well. So I think it's those doctors who do see it that way, that they have to continually evolve and improve, are kind of, I think, the better doctors in a way, because they're going to be able to help you with the latest up-to-date information. But to get back to your analogy about the trainers having to evolve like the astronauts, I mean, you were talking about the different physical ways of training people, but then throw nutrition into that, because if you go to see a trainer, when I'm at the gym and I hear a trainer working with a client, they're frequently talking about nutrition. And sometimes I just have to catch myself, because the things they're saying, you wonder what kind of nutritional training did they get? And it's probably very similar to the nutritional training that most doctors get, which is pretty poor, if at all existent. So you really have to be careful where you're getting your nutritional advice, I think.
Yeah, Brett, at least in your business, there's guidelines. In my business, we have what's called bro science, where these guys, nobody knows where it all started, how it started. I have some clues because I've been in the gym since 1970. And, so I've seen everything come and go. And you would be shocked at some of the things that, I'll give you one example. The half an hour window to eat after you work out. There's this magical half an hour window. And I remember hearing that like in 1973 for the first time in Donaldsonville, Louisiana, on the bayou. So if it was down where I was, it was in Baton Rouge. And if it was in Baton Rouge, it was in New Orleans. And if it was in New Orleans, the people up in Canton, Ohio were doing it too, right? So it just trickles down. And, you could turn on YouTube today and listen to any bro science meathead bodybuilder saying, oh yeah, there's a half an hour window. That's a fait accompli. There has never been a study. And if anyone's done a study, it was Tim Noakes. And according to Tim Noakes, because I've asked him, the study's never been done. And I've asked Eric Westman. He's also said the study has never been done. Yet people will say, oh no, this is settled science. There's a half an hour window. And as a matter of fact, there are products out there, these crappy products, which are full of high fructose corn syrup and all this stuff. It's supposed to be, energy drinks for people to have, and it's going to give you muscle after you work out. And it drives me nuts. And you guys don't have that. I want to get into guidelines with you, but first I need to tell everyone about Belcampo, belcampo.com. They came on towards the end of last year, folks. Belcampo, the meat is just delectable. And that's one thing I hear in the phone calls all the time. People say, hey, Vin, I thought you were just shilling for this company. Not so. I got Belcampo and it's delicious. Here's the thing. They're still giving us a 20% discount for first-time buyers. So go to belcampo.com. If you've already used your IP address, I'm going to teach you a way to cheat. Now, the kids today call it hacking. Go visit your neighbor. Buy meat with your neighbor. Do it on their computer. Get the 20% off. You guys can get double or triple the amount of meat. Find other ways to do it. Turn someone else on to Belcampo. Belcampo, 20% is a lot. Folks, you don't have to know much about business to understand what a loss leader is. They're losing money. They're losing money. And here's the thing, 20%. And if you spend more than $100 after the 20% discount, free shipping. And look, meat is heavy and they have to pack it in ice and keep it cold and everything. Belcampo.com. Don't fall asleep on those New York strips. The fillets are unbelievable right now. I had those last night. And the meatballs, I think, are still in stock unless Anna Vocino's bought them all out again. And the bone broth, come on. People always go, oh, I don't have time to make bone broth. They have the bone broth. Belcampo, BELCAMPO, Promo code Vinnie, VINNIE, 20% off. Go do it right now. Free shipping, over $100. We're talking to Dr. Bret Scher, cardiologist. Oh, by the way, folks, this is being, if you want to see what Bret Scher looks like, you already know what I look like. You could go to my YouTube channel because we're doing a YouTube video of this and you can watch the whole thing. A lot of times if your mom or your dad doesn't want to do low carb and they don't want to listen to a podcast, what's the podcast? You know what? Mirror this up to their big television. You can mirror it right from your computer on YouTube, put it on their television, make them watch it. That's why I'm doing these videos, to get more people involved, because some people like to watch. And now you have two senses. You have your eyes looking at it and you have your ears. And some people learn better that way. So go check out YouTube, Vinnie Todorich's YouTube, and this video will be up at the same time as the podcast. Bret, we talk about guidelines, and the main reason I send people to you is because they'll say, hey, man, I had 189 cholesterol total, and my doctor says you need to be on a statin. And I'll say, listen, I can't speak to that, but what were your LDLs, HDLs? And they'll tell me, and I know them to be perfect. I'll say, do you have a calcium score? Yeah, they had me get that. What is it? It's 0. And I'm sitting there going, and this doctor said, statin? Seems like they're giving something that can cause a problem where a problem didn't exist. This is hyperbole, but can you turn it into something real and give folks an idea of how to look at it?
Yeah, it's a big issue that a lot of people find themselves in a very confusing situation, because when you have a doctor that you know or trust, or maybe your primary care doctor referred you because they trust this doctor, and you're getting advice that you may not think is the best advice, it puts you in a pretty difficult situation to know what to do. And you bring up a couple of very good points there. I mean, and the first and foremost is no decision at all should be made about total cholesterol. When you have a total cholesterol number, that doesn't really tell you a whole lot. Now, back in the 70s, okay, that was appropriate decision making to act based on total cholesterol. But nowadays, that is gone. You really need
Bret, hang on. Let's not brush over that. Why was that? Because I think that leads into what people believe today. Why was that a way to look at it in the 70s?
Yeah, well, the technology just wasn't there to reliably and cheaply tell you what your LDL, HDL, and triglycerides are quickly and with consistency. So that technology took some time to develop. Now it seems, second nature. Like, how could this ever have not been the case, because those tests are so available now? And also the research that was done initially, because of the testing limitations, was done on total cholesterol. So I guess it made sense from that standpoint. But now, I mean, not only do we know HDL, LDL, triglycerides, which are more impactful than total cholesterol, we also can know ApoB, apolipoprotein B, which is even more impactful than LDL cholesterol. We can know size and density and inflammatory markers of your cholesterol, which adds to the interpretation of what your LDL cholesterol number is. So there's so much more we can know now to help us better refine our decision-making process. So the first thing to react to what you said is decisions should never be made on total cholesterol. We need to know so much more. The second part is, what else is there beyond your cholesterol? Because even with quote unquote high LDL cholesterol, you still need to put that into context of the person's overall health condition, what their goals are, what their risks are. And when I say that, I mean their blood pressure, their insulin levels, their insulin resistance markers, their blood sugar, their inflammatory markers. And like you said, a calcium score can be very helpful there. I mean, there's a good quality study showing that if your calcium score is 0, and you follow people, half of them get a statin, half of them don't get a statin over the next 10 years, there is no difference in who gets a heart attack over those 10 years, if you're on a statin or not, with a calcium score of 0. And because of that, the guidelines actually put in the option to get a calcium score for those people who are at what they call intermediate risk. And if it was 0, it said you don't need to start a statin. And that was groundbreaking, because guidelines are highly, highly pharmaceutical oriented. They are highly oriented towards prescribing medications. So for them to put something in there that said maybe you don't need this medication in this setting was really groundbreaking. I was very happy to see that. But people are still slow to respond to that. And here's one reason why. When you work as a doctor in a big medical group, there is pressure on you to bill correctly and to hit certain metrics because your group gets paid more money for that. That is just fact. That is the truth. It's not cheating. It's not stealing. It's the way the government has set up payment processes. So if you can work with someone with their lifestyle to get their LDL at what is determined to be a target level, and it takes 6 months, that's one way to do it. If you can prescribe a drug and get there in 6 weeks, your medical group is going to be much happier with that second approach, because you get the metric sooner, you're going to get paid more. So it's a perverse incentive that we have set up that just forces us to prescribe more medications rather than trying lifestyle, which is really the proper intervention for the vast majority of people, because that will reverse the underlying cause rather than just slapping a Band-Aid on what is the symptom, which is high LDL in the eye of your doctor. We don't die from high LDL. We die from heart attacks and strokes and neurodegenerative disease and cancer. Those are the things we want to avoid. LDL may play a role in those things, but is not the end-all be-all that needs to be addressed first. We need to look at the bigger picture and address the underlying health concerns, which frequently starts with lifestyle.
But shouldn't we worry if the government is saying, hey, all we care about is getting these people to this number, and the quicker you could get them there, the more money, the incentive is there to get them to that number. And we know that there's a drug that could get them to that number. Yeah, isn't that likened to when they go, oh, these fat cats that make all this money, they get all these tax breaks because there's all these loopholes that the government creates, those loopholes that almost make people cheat, to do the right thing. Sometimes you're wondering if you're cheating in that process of saying, well, you better not do that because the IRS might come. But wait a minute, they told me I can do this. Yeah, but you can't, don't close. Come on, Icarus, don't fly that close to the sun. We're always dealing with that sort of thing. This kind of reeks of that, and then you'll say, well, come on, Vin, at least we're getting their cholesterol down. Okay, let me give you another analogy. An athlete takes a PED, a performance enhancing drug, right? Well, they used a drug to get there. They would have gotten there in 8 months, but they got there in 8 weeks. Why is it okay for the government to say, hey, doctor, we're going to give you incentives to get this person to a certain number. Hey, Barry Bonds, we're going to do a whole, we're going to do a whole thing, a whole case on you because you took a performance enhancing drug because you got there in 8 weeks instead of 8 months. You're wrong, Barry Bonds, but hey, Bret Scher, you could do this. It's okay. Am I off by saying that it's a mixed message and we shouldn't be doing this?
No, I don't think you're off at all. And by the way, I have to mention, I was talking to my kids about Barry Bonds, and I pulled up some pictures of him to show them. He was a skinny little guy when he was with the Pirates. I mean, that transformation, I knew there was a difference, but wow, was that a big difference. My kids didn't believe it was the same guy. But anyway, that's a little digression.
but it's the same thing, right? And then all of a sudden we take these heroes, it's the same thing. And as soon as we find out, that Lance Armstrong took a PED, all of a sudden he's a bad guy. But guess what? He was playing by the same rules that everyone else was playing by that he was beating. They were also taking PEDs, but he becomes the fall guy. You see, so do we make the government the fall guy for giving everyone a statin? And, how does that work? It seems like a big roundy round and we never get anywhere.
Well, it's part of the whole philosophy of our medical culture right now, which is a drug-based culture. And because research is sponsored by pharmaceutical companies. The major organizations like the American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association, they are sponsored. They take tons of money from pharmaceutical companies. Every journal that you read has advertisements from pharmaceutical companies. It is clear that pharmaceutical companies have their hands, and not just pharmaceutical companies, actually. It's also makers of cereal and seed oils, and they are sponsoring a lot of these conferences and these organizations as well. So they all have their hands in the process, which just should not be allowed to happen, right? They can sponsor research if they want to. They should have zero involvement in guidelines in organizations. You know, the heart healthy seal that is on Honey Nut Cheerios is just absurd, and it all comes down to money. So that is part of the problem, that industry has their hands in everything, including influencing the government. So it promotes this overall thought process that drugs are safe, drugs are effective, and drugs are a proper way to achieve health. And there's also this underlying message that lifestyle change is hard. Most people don't comply and don't succeed with lifestyle changes. Therefore, drugs are the more effective way to go. So it's within that sort of assumption and context that our medical society, including our government, exists right now. And that's what we just have to shatter. We have to shatter those perceptions and show people that there is a better way, that there are lifestyle recommendations that people can comply with, can succeed with, can enjoy, that is going to reverse and improve all of these conditions we find ourselves in the middle of, whether it's obesity or diabetes or insulin resistance, that those can all get better and people can improve their health, not with the same old assumptions and the same old drug-based society, but with a better lifestyle-based intervention. And that's how we have to change the government, and we have to change the medical structure. And that's what you and I are trying to do. We just need a lot more help, a lot more support, a lot more bigger microphone to help do it.
Well, you know, that becomes more and more difficult. You know, Nina and I sit around and we'll have conversations on the phone. I wish those could be taped and put out as podcasts, because we talk about, you know, sometimes feeling like we're caught in something that we'll never pull out of. I just, as I tell her all the time, I said, you know, I'll just say, maybe history will look kindly on us, but it's very difficult when, you know, you can't get Twitter to give you a blue check, or that you know that you're being shadow banned and you can see it in real time, and Instagram is taking people away from you, and you wake up one morning and Wikipedia shut me down. Wikipedia took away my Wikipedia page, you know, and you know, we're fighting this fight from the ground up. We're kind of hoping that there's a groundswell, that something will grow out of it. And sometimes we wonder if that's going to ever happen. When you have to teach Shan School of Health over at Harvard, and you have Walter Willett taking millions and millions and millions of dollars from Unilever and every seed oil company and everyone else just to line his own pockets. And look, I know this all makes me sound like a conspiracy theorist, Bret, but I'm not, folks. You can go, they're not hiding this. You can go look this up. This is not some conspiracy theory crap. This is real. This is real. This is what's going on. And they're pushing this down your throats, and everyone's asleep at the wheel. And it just drives me nuts. That's why I keep having these conversations with people like yourself and begging you guys to be in my movies and everything else, so that we can at least have a fighting chance. I know that you work with the Diet Doctor. You do that podcast. Tell me a little bit about that, what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I mean, at Diet Doctor, we're just trying to use our platform to reach as many people as we can to show them different ways to achieve healthy weight loss, whether that's keto, different versions of low carb, higher protein nutrition, and how to build that into a lifestyle that works for you, with intermittent fasting, without intermittent fasting. There are so many different options that aren't talked about enough in mainstream medicine and mainstream weight loss circles and mainstream metabolic health circles, that we want to provide as many resources that we can. So whether it's our podcast, whether it's our guides, whether it's our weight loss program or our keto programs or our video library, we just want to get that information out there to as many people as possible. And now we've got this personalized meal planner now, where you can just answer some questions about yourself, your age, your height, you know, your gender, your activity level, what your goals are. And we can pick from our more than 1,000 recipes and come up with meal plans specifically designed to you to help you achieve your goals. And that's the kind of thing we're creating at Diet Doctor, to help people succeed with healthy weight loss and with metabolic health. And that's what I think we need more of, more options beside the standard eat less, move more, lose weight. And, you know, there's this big debate about calories. Do calories matter? Well, yes, calories matter. Does that mean you have to count calories? Well, no, it doesn't mean you have to count calories. The idea is to find a lifestyle that works for you, where you're not constantly calculating and weighing and measuring and worrying about reducing your calories and being hungry all the time. That doesn't work. We have 50, 60, 70 years to prove that that doesn't work. And now we're trying to provide better ways to achieve better results. So that's a lot of what we're doing at Diet Doctor, and making sure that our message is evidence-based, based in science, that everything we say we can defend with studies, with research, and that we present a relatively balanced approach. So, I mean, thank you for asking, but that's mostly what I'm working on now at Diet Doctor, in addition to doing the individual consults that you mentioned as well. So it really gives me that sort of 1-2 punch of being able to reach millions on the online platform and still help the one-on-one person on an individual platform.
No, I really do think that what you guys are doing over there is just God's work. I mean, Andreas Eenfeldt, who was in my movies, Fat, a documentary, and Fat, a documentary too. I think he was the one who started all of that, right? It started with him, or how did that begin? It's a European thing that kind of branched out.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. I mean, such a great success story that Dr. Andreas Eenfeldt, a family physician in Sweden, started with a blog purely in Swedish, just in Swedish, and then wrote a book in Swedish, and then eventually built his blog and his website to include English, and then slowly grew it to the point where now it is the largest #1 low carb and keto website in the world. And it's in multiple languages, and now hopefully soon will be the largest, most reputable healthy weight loss website in the world. That's sort of our trajectory, where we're headed. And it's such an incredible success story, starting with one man, one doctor, with a mission of helping people improve their health, and seeing that the way he was interacting with them in the healthcare system in Sweden wasn't achieving the goals he wanted, but wanted to reach more people, and found this way to do it, and has just grown it into a very successful company. So it's a great success story, and it's just a wonderful place to work, because we're so mission driven. Everybody there has the same goal of just helping people be healthier, and doing it in a way that works for them, not necessarily the way that everybody wants you to try and tell people to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been trying to get the people, Gravitas Ventures, who distribute my movie, because Andreas has asked me a couple of times, we'd like to have your movie on the platform. And I keep directing them towards, Gravitas. And it's like, and I need to have a personal conversation with the brothers over at Gravitas again. And it's a couple of brothers that run it, and the Gallagher brothers. And I need to explain to them, look, this thing is helping a lot of people. They have a large platform. They have a large audience. I know it's outside of what you guys do. They're looking around, they're putting the movie on airlines, and, all over the internet, and on Amazon and Hulu, or wherever they put the movie. And I get that. And it's on 68 VODs around the world. I get that. But, when you guys call, or when the guy in Australia calls and says, hey, we want it on our platform, they need to open up to that. I'm trying to get these things out to everyone. And sometimes I feel like I'm fighting a losing battle. Folks, the one place I'm not fighting a losing battle is with my company, NSNGfoods.com. You can go there and check out the ultra fat product. We're going to talk a little bit about low carb here in a minute. I'm going to go, Bret, into talking about that, but we can start by talking about high fat. I came up with a product that was originally meant for people just to take when they're hiking, biking. It sounds like an old tampon commercial from the 70s. You can go play tennis and handball and swimming and everything. Yeah, this product is great for everything. It's made for when you're on the go. You just rip the top off. For the video, I should have had one sitting here to show it to you guys, but I'm not that good. So go check out my ultra fat at nsngfoods.com. You're going to love the product. It's not just people are using it for a snack. I'm going to be on a road trip this weekend, and I will definitely have a bunch of them with me, along with my Ziploc bag full of already peeled hard-boiled eggs. That's always my secret food that I take with me. And by the way, my super secret is, once I put those eggs in a Ziploc, I sprinkle the salt in there. I don't have to do anything. One hand is still on the wheel while I'm eating. Of course, then there's yolk everywhere, but that's a different story for a different day. Go check out nsngfoods.com and get some of my ultra fat. I can't give you guys a promo code because I'm already selling it at such a discounted price. I think if you buy, multiples, or if you do a subscription, it becomes cheaper. As a matter of fact, I know, I'm saying I think, but it's my company. I know what's going on. So you guys can do that. Go check out NSNG Foods, get the ultra fat product. We are working on other food products that will be out soon. We're talking to Dr. Bret Scher. Bret, you said, you guys tell people not to worry about calories. And that's the one thing I'm always telling people too. And then I'll look on my very own NSNG group on Facebook. And, some of the older folks will start yelling at some of the new puppies and going, you're eating too much fat. That's why you're not losing weight. And I spoke to one of those women today who said, I was being yelled at on your site by someone else. And when I just got right down to it, she was still having, she was still putting creamer in her coffee with a flavor. And she was still having, some different drinks that were diet drinks. And there were ways to clean it up. And I'm always saying it's not so much about the calorie. It has to do with what the hormones are doing. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think this is one of those areas where you're either in a camp, you're in the calorie camp or the hormone camp. Well, I like to sit between them. I mean, I think they both matter. They definitely matter. If you're eating lower calories, but not addressing your insulin levels, that's probably not going to succeed. If you are lowering your carbohydrates, but massively overeating calories, that's probably not going to succeed. You've got to find the middle ground that works for you, and doing it in a way where you're not hungry and not having cravings. And that's where low carb, adequate protein, higher fat diet really works well for so many people. Now, can you get into trouble by drinking too many butter coffees during the day and piling cream on everything? Sure, some people can. And I think maybe that's why you see, keto weight loss start to go down, and then maybe plateau for a number of people. And then when they get rid of their butter coffee, but focus on the fat that naturally comes with their food, right? It doesn't mean you're eating chicken breasts and plain steamed broccoli. Nobody wants to do that. You're
Right.
eating the chicken with the skin on, you're eating the ribeye, you're putting the butter on your broccoli. But that's different than purposely adding saturated fats that or fats in general that maybe you don't need. Or if you need a little extra boost of energy for your body to run on fat as energy, taking a little fat for that can definitely help, because you have to think about it. What is fat? It's energy, it's calories. Our body uses it to burn for energy. So if you're taking more than you need, you can stall weight loss. So it makes it a little more complicated than just eat all the fat you want. Because for most people, that is going to work perfectly fine. For a lot of people, they are going to lose weight and feel great doing that because they get rid of the junk, they get rid of the carbohydrates and then the refined sugars and the processed foods. You get rid of that and you start feeling great and you start burning fat for fuel. But there does come a point where you need to sort of equilibrate and make sure you're getting adequate protein. And then you might need to regulate your fat a little bit more. But what's so funny is, like, with the keto crowd, if you say reduce your fat, all of a sudden they think there's no way I'm eating low fat. Well, maybe it's going from an 80% fat diet to a 65 or 75% fat diet. That's still pretty high fat in the scheme of things. We're not talking about low fat, but I think some people do need to regulate that and understand fat is energy, and you take it in and you burn it. You burn it as fuel. You burn it for energy.
Yeah, I was just talking about my product, the NSNG Foods product. And in the ultra fat, I call it ultra fat because I also add my ultra salt to it. So you're getting electrolytes, but more so I use coconut oil along with the nut butter, which is a medium chain triglyceride, which the exchange is a lot better than if you had a long chain triglyceride, fatty acid. So, when you try to explain it to people, they go, wait, what can I have? And what can I have? And, everyone wants absolutes nowadays, because if the diet culture hasn't done enough to us, diet culture has taught us that, oh, wait, you told me I can have fat. Now you're telling me I can't have fat? No. Bret didn't say that. He's saying if you're having too much fat, your body is it's using that fat as energy. and is never getting to its subcutaneous fat, is not getting to its intrinsic fat. And also, you know, when I get on the phone calls with people, they'll go, then NSNG was working so well. I lost 50 pounds and now I'm stalled. And I'll say, are you gaining weight? They'll say no. And they'll go, by the way, I'm still feeling great.
Yeah.
I'm stalled. And I'll go, okay. Whenever I hear that, I always know that you're living on the fat that you're taking in. You've gone a little too far. You just need to, and by the way, it's not a big crack back. You don't have to eliminate fat and just eat pure protein or anything else. It means just cracking back a small amount. We don't have to do anything in large amounts just to get that engine running lean and mean again. What say you, Bret?
Yeah, I think that's a great point you bring up about extremism. So we've been sort of trained that if something is good, more of it is better. So whether that's protein, whether that's fat or carbohydrate reduction, that you need to just pull that lever as hard as you possibly can to get better results. That's not always the case. Extremism is not always the right answer, but it doesn't mean you completely abandon the theory or the process, right? It doesn't mean if a 50% protein diet is not the answer, that doesn't mean you go back to a 12% protein diet. You know, if 80% fat diet isn't working for you, that doesn't mean you go to a 20% fat diet, right? There's plenty of middle ground there. So it is sort of getting away from that extremism. I think that's a very important point that you brought up that people need to realize. And like you said, it doesn't have to be big changes. It just has to be little changes can have a big effect. It also brings up the sort of the over reliance of the scale, because one of my biggest questions when someone says my weight loss has stalled, I'm really frustrated. And like you said, are you still feeling well? How's your energy? How's your blood sugar? How's your insulin level? How's your visceral fat and your abdominal fat? You know, if you got a DEXA scan or a bod pod or something like that, you know, what are your lipids doing? What's your blood pressure? All these other markers. And frequently they're like, oh yeah, those are great. Those are great. Those are fine. But how do I lose that last 10 pounds?
Right.
And then you have to sort of reassess like, okay, well, what are your goals here? And what are you trying to accomplish? And maybe the weight isn't the most important thing when you're hitting all those other markers and everything else is looking so good.
Yeah, you know, people, you know, and I get it, you know, they don't want to go in reverse. They've been there before, you know, and every morbidly obese person can tell you about the time they lost 120 pounds
Right.
and put it all back on plus. And I feel for them. I'm right there with them. I'm like, look, I get it. I get where you are. You think this is the turning point where you're going to go back up. It's not going to be. It never has to be. You got this, you know, and you might have 40 or 50 pounds to go. Guess what? You're going to get there. It might be, it's going to take more time than you thought, but it's going to happen. And you just have, a lot of times they just need that encouragement. Bret, I want to do a quick break here, but when I come back, I want you to talk a little bit about your practice. I always ask cardiologists, and I've asked you this before, whether you're an electrician or a plumber when it comes to cardiologist or a guy that does both. Before I do that, folks, the one thing that every cardiologist will agree on across the board without any hesitation is olive oil. This stuff is healthy for you. You'll never hear at any cardiologist convention where they will ever argue about olive. They'll all just go, yeah, take olive oil. It's good for you. And it's not just any olive oil, because here in the good old US of A, you're going to find this hard to believe, but you're able to cut it up to 40% with seed oils, the oil that will give you inflammation, the oil that will clog your arteries, the trans fat oil, the crap, and still call it pure olive oil. That does not happen with Villa Capelli olive oil, the longest running sponsor of this show. All the oil comes from Puglia, Italy. I know the owner. The owner passed away. The owner's husband still runs the company, and he's still a sponsor of this show. And he and Paul ran a perfect company, and he's keeping it. Stephen Crutchfield is keeping this company running exactly the way it was. This is 100% pure olive oil. You want to save 10%? Put in promo code Vinnie, VINNIE, every single time, VINNIE, 10% discount. If after the discount, you're still over $100, free shipping. That's a lot, because if you get a 3-liter tin of olive oil, that's heavy. You want to get that free shipping. So spend yourself about 150 and 120 bucks. After the discount, you'll still be over 100. So that's double savings. And of course, when you're buying 3 liters, you know, you're going to get some savings in bulk. So it's good olive oil is not cheap, folks. You want to do it this way, and you want to stay away from the seed oils. So go check out Villa Capelli olive oil, promo code Vinnie, Vinnie, no wimpy Y, and you'll get 10% off and free shipping over $100. We're talking to Dr. Bret Scher. Bret, I always ask cardiologists because I like, there's always new people coming into this podcast. I always qualify you guys as plumbers and electricians. The plumbers are the ones that go in and roto-root, whenever you got the clogged arteries, or they do the open heart surgery if they have to. And then you have the electricians, right? If you have yourself, you need to get an ablation or something because you have something fluttering. Explain the difference and explain what you do and who you are.
Yeah, so I am neither an electrician nor a plumber. So I did my fellowship in a combined general and preventive cardiology fellowship. Interestingly, it was an Ornish style program. It was based on a very low fat nutrition intervention. So of course, when I was trained, that's must be the best way to teach people to eat. So I was trained in a preventive and general cardiology. So I can manage medically and with lifestyle coronary artery disease and blockages and arrhythmias. But when someone needs that stent or needs that ablation, then I send them to the plumbers and the electricians. So I'm neither of those. I got to think of a good analogy for what a preventive cardiologist would be.
You're a contractor. You're a cardiologist contractor.
Okay. There you go.
Contract.
I like it.
So Bret, I didn't know that. Why did I know that about the Ornish? Dean Ornish is who we're talking about here. One of the guys that, will tell you the sky is falling if you even have a cow be born. What's that like? Did you ever meet the man? And how do you rectify what was going on then and what you believe now?
Yeah, so to clarify, it wasn't his program. So I say it was an Ornish style program. It was a program designed on his principles, basically. Because if you design an Ornish style program, it can get reimbursed by Medicare. So that's one of the reasons why you see a lot of Ornish style preventive cardiology programs. But look, so many things about this program were fantastic. You got people to quit smoking. You got people to start moving their bodies. I remember my office visits would be walking around the track, and we were in La Jolla up on the cliffs near Torrey Pines golf course. So in the distance, you have the golf course, and then you have the ocean, and these were where we did our office visits, walking around the track. I mean, it was heaven, and it was magical for the patients. You got them in stress management, and you got them in community groups to feel that community engagement and help them. But so promoted the very low fat plant-based diet. So, that was part when I went out into practice, I thought this is the way to do it. Everybody's going to be awesome. Everybody's going to totally succeed. And what I realized is people love the exercise. People love the community engagement. People love the stress management. And most people try to tolerate the diet, but the diet was definitely the weakest link for compliance. And people's blood sugar and insulin levels were rising because it wasn't necessarily what we hear now, the whole food plant-based diet. It was as many vegan and low-fat diets can be. It was full of junk. I mean, it's full of processed foods. And
Oreos are vegan, right? I mean, you can have an Oreo.
Yeah, I mean, I can't count how many times someone, when I ask them about their nutrition, they're like, "Oh, I'm vegetarian. I'm good there." Like, well, hang on a second. You can have a healthy vegetarian diet, but just because it's vegetarian doesn't by definition mean it's healthy. And same for vegan. Then we got to go through all their supplement lists. And again, you can have a healthy vegan diet. It takes a lot of work, and you have to supplement. It's a non-nutritionally complete diet. You got to make sure you're getting adequate protein. It certainly can be done, but it's not by default. So that took me a little bit of learning and transition when I got into the real world. And then I was fortunate enough to get exposed to low carb diets through a health coach I was working with, who was a good friend of mine. And that's what really opened up my eyes. And then seeing how it works clinically, seeing the research behind it, personal experience, that just, started me on this whole new world. And now, I still see some patients who follow a vegan diet. I would almost never recommend it as a first-line therapy, as a first-line nutritional intervention, but there are ways that you could potentially, succeed with it. And I think that's reasonable if someone chooses to do so. But animal products have been just put in jail for too long, and the research is just too weak to support the amount of restrictions and the amount of just negative news we have about animal products. And that's something we definitely need to undo the message on.
The scariest thing you said in that statement was right at the beginning, Bret, when you said there's compensation for putting people on an Ornish style vegan diet. So if there's compensation for that, there's compensation for statins. How do we right the plane? If that's what's going on, is there still compensation for putting people on an Ornish style vegan diet? And if there is, where's the proof? The proof is not there. How do we right the ship?
Yeah. That's such an interesting part about the proof, because people will frequently say, well, look, the Ornish study proves that a low-fat vegan diet is good for heart disease. Well, no, because it proves his program worked for the markers they were following, which were pretty weak endpoint markers. But again, I think the most important point was it's not a dietary study. It's a lifestyle intervention study. You get people to quit smoking. You get people to start exercising, to totally change their lifestyle, to start managing their stress better. That alone is going to show improvements. The diet was part of that, but there's no way you can say, see, all the results are due to this diet. So that's why Medicare compensation encompasses the whole program. But we don't have the evidence to say the diet by itself is the important point of the intervention. And even that, the outcomes for the trial that was done in that program were very weak and very suspect. And doing it today, nobody would choose those same outcomes, because you need better measurements, you need more reliable measurements and better outcomes. So that's one of the details. Now, the broader picture is, how do we right this ship? What do we do about this? And that's like you're saying with your discussions with Nina. Sometimes you just think, gosh, this problem is just too big to handle. Like, how do we fight these behemoths and the government and this groundswell moving in this direction, other than knowing that we are right in the sense that other approaches help people. We absolutely know that. We know there's not just one approach. We know that there are so many different approaches, and we have to start living in a society that promotes that mindset. And it's through, documentaries like yours, and through your podcast, and through just getting the message out there to let people understand that there's more out there. And we can do it from an individual basis, and then we can do it from a healthcare basis. And that's why, so at Diet Doctor, one of the things we're building now is what we call our DD Pro membership, or a Diet Doctor professional membership, where we want doctors and nutritionists and health coaches and personal trainers to come to us and use our resources to help your clients. And we're developing this whole program to make it as easy as possible for the professional to help their client, to show them there are other ways to do it. And we will provide all the resources so they don't have to recreate the wheel. That's one of the ways we're trying to fight this groundswell that's happening in the other direction.
Well, I hope you guys can get somewhere with it. I know Nina's trying it with Nutrition Coalition, trying to change government. But, when you have something like, the Ornish thing going on, where they're giving you kudos for that, people don't look deep enough. They just go, vegan, that's what we're doing. And look, I talked to a lot of registered dietitian, RDs, who run hospitals or work in hospitals, and they are disgusted. They're trying to make changes, and they're told, you gotta sing the company song here, and don't walk away from this. We're telling you this is what you must do. And they want to help people, but they feel like they can't.
Yeah.
So something has to happen in government, that, or at least with the American Heart Association, which is not, because of the aforementioned problems, or the American Diabetes Association. It won't, because of the aforementioned problem of where the money is coming from. Walter Willett is in no way, shape, or form going to change. I mean, I'm focusing on him in my next movie to show what this guy's done and the disaster that this guy's become. I mean, you were just talking about the cigarettes. Okay. When Eisenhower had a heart attack, he was a 3-pack-a-day guy, I think, with no filters, right? This guy was like the John Wayne of smoking.
Yeah, but it was the fat that caused it, right? That's
and exactly. We got one idiot from Minnesota University comes in and goes, it was the fat. And then everyone went, well, what? Yeah, the fat killed him. Wait, how's that again? Nobody looked at the 3 packs a day. you know, that drives me crazy. You know, that we will look at a shiny object, shiny object, shiny object, and then next thing you know, we're off and running, and nothing gets done. And here we are in 2021, and we have people, you know, morbidly obese. Most of this country is morbidly obese. We finally had a pandemic. And the one thing that we're finding out from that pandemic is that a majority of the people who died also had a comorbidity of fatty liver disease and or some form of obesity, generally morbid obesity. But in some cases, now they're saying that your numbers only had to be at 25 or 26, and that raised the risk of this happening, of dying of COVID. So it almost seems like those chickens have come home to roost, and we're still asleep at the wheel, or at least most people are. You're not, I'm not. Nina's over there banging her head against the wall, and Gary Taubes is too. But, you know, it makes you wonder how we're going to end up righting this ship.
Yeah. And, you know, the COVID example is such a great example and a disgusting example, that it sort of like it took us to get to this point to really focus on it. You know, the obesity, diabetes, metabolic health epidemic has been going on for decades, and very little, if any, progress has been made. So now it took this nationwide or worldwide pandemic that selectively was killing elderly and those with metabolic disease and obesity. And that's not the only people they were killing, but the vast majority of people the virus was killing were in that category. And we had decades to solve this problem before we got to this point. And it just really shows the mirror to what has been happening over the past few decades and what the cost is. I mean, previously the cost was, okay, you're going to get heart attacks or lose your vision or have kidney dysfunction down the road, right? 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. Well, COVID brought this to an abrupt halt and said, oh no, we're not talking about down the road. We're talking about next week, next month, and we need to shut down the nation's economy and put people out of work to protect people that we could have been protecting for the past few decades if we only got the message right and knew how to help these individuals. We could have prevented all this. I mean, it would be so interesting to create an alternative universe and release coronavirus in that alternate universe where we don't have the obesity and metabolic disease epidemic, and see how it would play out then. My guess is it would be entirely different than the way it played out this time. And it's just so sad for all the lives that were lost, both from the disease and from the shutdowns and all the economic implications. I mean, just all the way down the list, just there are too many victims to even mention in this whole scenario.
Not to mention that lives are still being lost, but my understanding is that India is now having a cropping up of it. And I've spent time in India. You want to talk about people with metabolic syndrome? Yeah. Oh my God, it's sad what goes on there. And these people are eating horrible diets. It is high carbohydrates, a lot of seed oils, a lot of, you know, we like to think of Indians, oh, they're just eating rice with some pilaf and this and that. No. You see these people walking down the street, it's just like America. They're eating chips out of bags and they're drinking sugary drinks. And, you know, it's very sad what's going on there. And there's a large amount of poverty there. And the more impoverished the area, the more, you know, there's this orange drink a local had me taste. I couldn't believe you can make sugar taste that sweet. And it literally is shocked my system because I'm just not used to sugar to begin with. But I said, Serena, taste this. Does this taste more sugary than sugar? And she was like, oh my God, we're choking on this. But that's what these people are doing there. We need to fix this worldwide, and we need to start right here in America. Bret, we're going to make that the final word. Hang on, I want to say goodbye to you off the air. Folks, you know, if you like what this show is doing, we've kept it free for 9, 10 years now, and we have close to 1,900 shows. And the way we do it, the way I pay for all of this is by you, before you go to Amazon, you go to VinnieTartarusz.com, you click through the banner, bookmark it, use it every time. Also, Amazon, Jeff Bezos wasn't making enough money. They chopped the percentage. We only make about 25% of the money we used to make. And the way we're supplementing that is I've always had the the superfan page at VinnieTortorich.com. If you have a couple of extra shekels, we would appreciate it if you would throw it right there. That money does not go into my pocket. It goes to pay for this podcast so that we could keep bringing people like Bret Scher to you guys over and over again, because they're dropping mad knowledge, as the kids say today. So please do that. And thank you ahead of time. Also, go check out the Diet Doctor podcast with Dr. Bret Scher. Also, if you live in the California area, you can call Bret Scher. Bret, where do they go to sign up for a consult with you?
Yeah, they can go to lowcarbcardiologist.com, and I can see people in California, Arizona, Nevada, Texas, Utah, Colorado, Illinois, and Ohio.
If you didn't hear those states, folks, go back. Just don't ask me on Twitter. Just go back 15 seconds and listen to it. You can hit the 15-second back button. Go do that. And Dr. Scher, I'm sending people to him daily. And you would be shocked at what you can learn from this gentleman. So go and do that. I think we did it all. On behalf of Dr. Bret Scher, my name is Vinnie Tortorich. Put life into living and do it with enthusiasm.